Hello everyone. Welcome back to the AWS Certified Solution Architect Associate Certification Bootcamp. In this session, we will explore EC2 cost saving strategies focusing on EC2 Hibernate, Spot instances and Spot fleets. These are the critical aspects as managing operational cost is an important aspect of AWS certification and for any real-world use cases. Let's recap the EC2 pricing model because selecting the right pricing model for your use case is the first step towards cost optimization. To support different workload patterns, AWS offers multiple pricing models. To start with on-demand instances, which are highly flexible. You pay as you go with no long-term commitment. However, this is one of the most expensive options. Next, we have reserved instances. Reserved instances ideal for predictable workload. You can save up to 72% of EC2 cost compared to on-demand pricing, but you must commit uses for a 1 or 3 years term. Next, we have savings plan. Savings plan is similar to reserved instances, but with more flexibility. You can save up to 65% compared to on-demand pricing. However, you need same 1 or 3 years of commitment. Then we have dedicated host and instances. Dedicated host and instances are the most expensive options, typically used for compliance requirements or for specific per core software licensing needs. And last but not least, we have Spot instances. Spot instances offer significant cost savings but require fault-tolerant architecture because these instances can be interrupted by AWS. Now let's review how optimal usage of Spot instances can be beneficial to reduce the operational cost. Spot instances allow you to take advantage of AWS's unused EC2 capacity at a fraction of the cost, but there's a trade-off. Spot instances can be reclaimed by AWS at any time with just 2 minutes notice. Think of it like booking an airline standby ticket. They are cheap, but you can be bumped if the flights are fills up. That's why Spot instances are best for workloads like big data processing, image rendering, CI/CD jobs, or any workload that can tolerate interruptions. And that is why AWS does not recommend Spot instances for any critical or steady workloads. Managing Spot instances individually can be painful. That is where Spot fleets come in. A Spot fleet is a set of Spot instances managed as a group. To balance cost and availability, you can combine on-demand and Spot instances in a Spot fleet. To balance cost and availability, you can combine on-demand and Spot instances in a Spot fleet. And you can use launch template to provision a mix of on-demand, reserve and Spot instances across different instance types and availability zones. You can configure Spot instances with allocation strategies. You can use lowest price for cost saving. This strategy simply selects instances from the Spot pools with the lowest prices. If your application can easily handle interruptions and restarts, this strategy might be suitable. Next, we have diversified. As the name suggests, you can spread instances across multiple pools. This strategy distributes your Spot instances across all the specified Spot pools, reducing the impact of single pool experiencing capacity issue. Then we have capacity optimized, where AWS will prioritize your predefined instance type while still aiming for optimal capacity availability. And last but not least, we have price capacity optimized. Under this strategy, AWS focuses on pools with high capacity availability at the lowest possible prices, reducing the likelihood of your Spot instances being interrupted, which minimizes interruption risk. That is why AWS recommends using this strategy for majority of the Spot workloads. As an example, if you are running a video rendering job, you can request a Spot Fleet across different instance types and availability zones. AWS will provision this cheapest capacity while ensuring your workload continues even if some instances are interrupted. EC2 Spot Fleet will help you to manage interruptions automatically. Now let's review EC2 Instance Life-Cycle. When you launch an instance from AWS Management Console or using CLI, you start with an EC2 AMI. And then when you launch an instance, first the instance state will go to pending status. From pending status, it will turn to running status. Now once the instance is in running status, you can terminate the instance. First the instance status will change to terminating and then it will change to terminated. Once an EC2 status change to terminated, there is no way you can retrieve that instance or any data from that instances. While the system is in running, you can still reboot an instance and it will turn back to the running state. You can also change the status of an EC2 instance when it is in pending status and you can terminate that instance. From an pending status, if you initiate termination, it will transition to terminating and then it will terminate. Then from running status, you can initiate stop. If you initiate EC2 stop option, first the status will change to stopping and then finally stop. Please remember, stopping is only available for EBS backed EC2 instances. Now from stop status, you can again restart it or you can start it and it will turn to pending, and from pending it will come to running status. Now when the EC2 instance is stopping or totally stopped, you can again initiate termination, and if you terminate, it will first turn to terminating and then terminated. Now why you are talking all this EC2 state transition? Let's try to understand when you will stop an EC2 instance, what are the data that will be persisted and what are the data that will not be persisted. And here you can see the EC2 instance will get an public IPv4 address. It will get one private IPv4 address if you have attached with an elastic IP, and also if it has a dual stack, that means if it will has one IPv6 address. There will be some RAM if data are there in the RAM. Also you have EBS root volume, EBS data volume, and if you have instance store volumes. Now once you stop an instance, you are going to first lose the public IPv4 address. You are also going to lose any data that is stored in RAM, and you are also going to lose any data which is storing in the instance store volume. Now let's summarize the EC2 stop state. In terms of what it will persist, any data you are storing on EBS volume, it could be your OS disk or it could be your data disk. Instance metadata like instance ID, tags, it will also be preserved. Elastic IP, it will also remain attached in the stop status. When your EC2 instance is in stop status, you are not paying for the compute. However, you are still getting billed for the EBS volumes. Now, what it does not persist, we have already reviewed. RAM content, ephemeral storage, or if you have anything on the instance store, and processes and session states are not persisted and those will be terminated. Now, what are the advantages? Instead of keep running an instance, when you terminate, you can save cost because you are not paying for the compute. It will be easy to restart with the same configuration. You don't have to start from scratch, and that is useful for any maintenance or temporary shutdowns. Ideal use cases are if you have a development or test environment, if you have instances that do not need to retain memory state, or if you want to drive cost saving during off-peak hours. However, if you have some use case like where you have to preserve the in-memory state like session data, cache data, or maybe if you have some data science or machine learning workload with large in-memory datasets, then EC2 stop state is not going to work for you. To address this challenge, AWS introduced EC2 Hibernate State. In terms of what it will persist, whatever the data it was persisted in a stop state, plus it is going to persist RAM content. EC2 Hibernate is the answer if you want to start on the same state where you left off. Although EC2 Hibernate comes with some limitations, and for the AWS certification you have to remember these limitations. Hibernation is supported only for a specific instance type, that is for C, M and R family instances. The EC2 operating system must be Amazon Linux, Ubuntu or Windows. Any other operating system does not support EC2 hibernation. Your root volume must be encrypted and your RAM size must be less than 150 GB. You also need to enable EC2 hibernation at the time of EC2 launch. If you haven't explicitly enabled hibernation, then your EC2 instances will not support hibernation. In terms of advantages, it is faster to resume. Then it is also preserving any in-memory state like session data, cache data, and this is ideal for long-running processes that should not restart. Let's review the ideal use cases for hibernation. If you have development environment where you want to resume your work quickly and you don't want to restart, if you have any data science or machine learning workload with large in-memory datasets, and if you have any custom applications with complex initialization steps and you don't want to spend time on initializing every time when you are restarting that system. Now let's compare EC2 Stop status and Hibernate status side by side. To start with the RAM content, we have already reviewed. EC2 Stop does not persist any RAM content, however Hibernate it does. In terms of boot time, when the instance is in stop status and if you are restarting it, it will take the full restart time. However, from hibernation to start status, it will be very fast. In terms of cost, both will have the same cost. You are only paying for the EBS volumes. You are not paying for any EC2 compute charges. In terms of supported instance type, EC2 Stop is supported by most of the EC2 instances. However, hibernation is only supported by compute, memory optimized and general purpose instances. In terms of use cases, we saw if you have any general pause use cases, you can use Stop. However, if you want to resume exactly where you left, then Stop is not the answer. You should go with the hibernation. Now, in terms of cost saving summaries, and you have to remember this for the AWS certification exam, you should use on demand for any unpredictable workloads. You should use reserve instances or savings plans if you have steady state workload and if you have a commitment for 1 year or 3 years, or if you have a workload visibility for next 1 year or 3 years. You can use spot instances or spot fleets for a flexible or if the workload can tolerate interruption. You should use Hibernate for any fast recovery and saving initialization time. You should remember this terminology for hibernation, that if you want to save initialization time, AWS might give you some questions quoting this terminology, then EC2 Hibernate might be the potential answer. That wraps up this module. If you found this video helpful, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more AWS exam preparation courses and cloud certification bootcamps. Got questions or feedback? Drop them in the comment. We love to hear from you. Thanks for learning with us at Cloud Expert Solutions. You are now one step closer to crushing your exam. See you in the next module.